doing the best that I could to get my needs met at the time. So if I can reclaim that part of me and say, hey, I'm not going to reject you. I don't hate you. I want to welcome you back. I want to give you love and I want you to understand that I forgive you and that there's nothing to be ashamed of, right? We're going to move forward in a different way now. You reclaim the begotten parts of yourself, the parts that you tried to hide.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of the Spiritual Inspired Show. I am your host, Claudiu Murgan. For older episodes, please visit spiritualinspired.ca or ours.network or our YouTube channel. My guest today is Whitney Walker. Whitney, thank you for joining me.
Yes, it's a wonderful opportunity to be on your show after I just had you on mine.
Yes, so you are young, beautiful, you love to travel the world. End of the interview. We are done.
Thanks. That's a good synopsis. I like it.
Yes. So, your own journey through addiction, trauma, and recovery deeply informs your work. What was the pivotal moment that made you decide to step fully into healing and helping others heal?
Yeah, thank you so much for again for having me and for that question. Well, we talked a lot on my show about sort of the state of humanity and where we find ourselves, where we're feeling really beholden to rules and beliefs that we've created around what's possible, right? So I'm a big fan of comparing the micro experience. If you want to understand the bigger experience, the macro, look at your micro experience, which is you, your life. And so after I had struggled with my own challenges in life, right? From a young age, I had a hard time fitting in. I made friends, but I kind of was off-putting to some people, and I would look around and just think, what is this place? From a young age, I was like, why am I here? And I would ask weird questions. I always gravitated towards adults and I'd want to know all this information. Like, why do we do this way and this that way? I swear it felt like I was an alien from another planet that was like, this place is weird and I don't get it.
And in fact, if I can interject, one of my dear friends, Kathy Mason, which I interviewed a couple of times, when she was 5, she couldn't fit in. And she was telling me she went outside in the backyard looking up to the sky with her hands up, said, "You dropped me on the wrong planet."
I'm sure, I mean, you're 5 years old. You're pretty connected still to the spirit world. So probably some of her remembered being dropped off or whatever her experience was. But yeah, it's sort of this disconcerting feeling because my understanding is that Earth is one of the most challenging physical experiences you can have as a soul. Incarnating on Earth is like boot camp to the nth degree. It's like where you go when you're like, really need to kind of gear up and I really want to have a big evolutionary experience, I'll go to Earth, where everything is upside down. Nothing makes sense. And number one, the reason why we struggle is because fear is placed over love. And number two, well, it's the same sort of thing, but also I think it's the only place in all of the solar system and all of the universe where we don't have an inherent knowing of who we are. I believe maybe there's a few like Earth, but most places in the universe know what we're doing here. We're a part of the whole. There's an infinite source of love, energy that's benevolent, that we're all a facet of, and we're all co-creating different experiences together to evolve and grow as the universe. On Earth, it's the one place where we wake up and we're like, why are we here? Nobody knows, right? What are the best ways to live your life? It's debatable, So it's an interesting experience to say the least. So I found myself feeling very lonely, right? I had this inherent sense of, I don't know if I'm meant to be here, and I just don't feel, maybe that I want to be here, that I fit in. So over time, I became very curious about things that changed the way I feel, right? Because restingly, I was always a very exuberant, excitable, enthusiastic person. But then here's what happens. I'm a therapist, right, by trade. So I'm very keen to the idea of addressing childhood trauma, inner child healing, because what happens to us as children creates the foundation for how we perceive and what we believe about everything else for the rest of our lives. And that can put us in deep detriment if we don't address it. So the first time that a child is told, "Oh God, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? You're stupid, you're bad, you're ugly, you're fat, you're this, you're that." We get this shock to our system, which before then might have thought like, "Oh, I get to be myself. This is great." But again, it's a unique experience on earth where we think, "Oh God, there's something wrong with me. There's something about me that is bad. There's something about me that people don't like. And if I'm not accepted and loved by those around me, I'm going to die." Because that's the mentality that we have as humans. Because back in the day when we lived in tribes, if you were rejected from the tribe, you did die. Tribes learned to live together. So it was in isolation, it was very hard to survive. So, but instead, we may not die, but inside of ourselves, we feel like I'm not worthy, right? And so I developed that unworthiness wound very early because I was just kind of weird and different. I was told I was ugly. I was told I was annoying and dumb, all those things. Super fun. And then I got bullied a lot through high school. So I developed an eating disorder when I was young because I turned to food as comfort, as support, as something that always was reliable, right? And to anyone listening, I believe anything can be an addiction. It's anything that allows you to change the way you feel, something outside of you, right? Something external, where because you stop to believe that you have within you the ability to regulate and change how you feel. When we know our inherent value and worth, nothing outside of us can change that. But when we don't know it, everything outside of ourselves determines that. Am I good enough? Am I acceptable enough? Am I smart enough? Well, you better go ask somebody else because you can't decide for yourself, right? And it was brutal to live that way. And I got so much comfort and solace from food. I could run to it. I could turn to it. It was like my greatest companion. It was reliable. And then, there's the struggle that so many women have, which is our appearance and how we look and body image. And eating all this food for comfort, my weight began to change. And again, the comments started, people said things, and I panicked. And so that's when my eating disorder increased because I then had to figure out, well, how do I use this as my source of support, but not, be able to stay at the weight that I want. And eating disorders are incredibly exhausting, right? As we know, the mind, body, and soul are so intrinsically connected. And with any kind of addiction, you're basically saying that you have no regard for your body. You're saying, my body is like pretty disposable, right? It's fine that it's at the whim of being treated badly, it's being overworked, it's being undernourished or abused, right? Because that's just collateral for me to get my needs met. Because my needs are that I need to feel safe in this scary world. So sorry, body, you're the collateral. We don't recognize that it's going to affect our mind and our emotions to abuse our body. But usually we abuse our bodies because our emotions are unsettled, dysregulated. It's all connected again. And then along with that, I found drugs and alcohol. And I was like, wow, this also makes me feel better. I feel sad, I feel depressed, but when I use drugs, there's this beautiful euphoric feeling that I have. There's all the worries seem to melt away. And I really started drinking for oblivion. I love just like checking out. It was like, it's exhausting to be a person. It's exhausting to have these feelings of shame and guilt about who I am, embarrassment around who I am. All these things really suck. So I'd rather be checked out. So I used those together for about 2 decades. My eating disorder developed around 14, which is around the same time when I started drinking, using drugs to change how I feel. And then it's just like this whole chain reaction. Because then I also started, using sex as a way to change how I feel and to get enough attention and to feel better. And that's its own dark hole when you start, because again, talk about rejecting and just displacing your body. When you're using your body to feel acceptance and to feel love, and it's not actually what you're receiving, it's just attention is very different from genuine love, right? So if you put this all together, it really kind of illustrates the human condition we've created here on earth, which is, again, you need to seek outside of yourself the things you need because you don't have them. And all of them are just going to be a means of feeling that you are loved. That's what I believe it all comes down to. It all comes down to love. It all comes down to, the other word for that is divine source, God, whatever you want to call it. We're all seeking God in a way. And a lot of people are offended by that term. And I read once that the only reason that people were never offended by the term God until religion was developed. Humans don't like it because we're like, oh, those religions, they tell us what to do. I'm not going to be told what to do. There's nothing offensive about the idea of a God, right? But we've created it as, this white dude with a big beard hovering over us, judging us, making these big rules. But then when I had my awakening, which I'll get to, and you realize that was actually created to scare us, right? So that's why people don't like the term God. But what I'm saying is that we're all just, and the other word for that is unconditional love. We're all seeking unconditional love. But really, I think subconsciously, a lot of people don't think that that exists, right? So we're like, I just need the second best thing, which is to try and get attention, love, affection from others by any means, get approval, get acceptance, all of that to look the right way, to be the right way. And then if I can just micromanage all these things, then I can feel unconditional love. But that doesn't even make sense because those are all literally conditional terms, right? If you get attention because you're attractive, what happens if you're not attractive? Right? I was told I was unattractive for the first 20 years of my life. So I know what it's like to be on both sides of that. And people treat you very differently when they think that you're attractive, and they treat you very differently when they think you're not. Basically, like you're not of value. So again, we have these systems in place that are all so conditional. If you look the right way, if you're achieved enough, if you come from the right family, the right society, the right place, the right city, the right country, then you're good. Otherwise, not so much. The essence of divine God source knows nothing about that. Everything is unconditional. So bring me back to, high school, college when I was miserable and just I somehow made my way through and got things done. And it wasn't all grim, right? Like I would have moments of revelation. I've always had a keen energy within me that always felt like there's something bigger, right? And that everything that's happening to me, I don't think it's as big as what I feel in my heart sometimes when I want to know more about what's possible, right? Our creativity. Creation is also an aspect of the divine, right? Desire. You have a desire. You think, wow, I would love to experience this. And then the creation bubbles up where you're like, well, what can I do to experience that? That is literally the whole experience of God itself. God had the desire to see what it could create and experience, and it did. And now we have infinite versions of that. So we're a microcosm of the macro. So I would have these big moments, I would have good days, and all of a sudden I get smacked down by somebody insulting me, by feeling not good enough, blah, 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 blah. Depression, anxiety, all of this shit that we have to deal with because of the way the world is. I am a strong believer, and I don't know how you feel about this, but that if we address this, if we move from conditional into unconditional regard for ourselves and others, there would be no depression, no anxiety, addiction, eating, just none of that would exist. It literally is just tools for this sinking ship we've created. If we feel our ship is sinking, we're going to use strange methods to try it. But if we naturally believe that we were taken care of, we wouldn't have all of these things, and there wouldn't be illness. There wouldn't be disease and cancer. There wouldn't be any of that if we were living in alignment with our true selves that is able to heal itself, that is able to express itself just as it wants. The word freedom is also akin to love, source, God. It's all the same thing. But again, that's another reason that we're sick, we're addicted, we're unhappy, is because we're not free. We're like, no, I have to stay concealed because if I show who I really am, I'll be rejected. I'll be laughed out. Bad things can happen. I'll lose my place in society, all of that, right?
Yes, but at the same time, I think I was lucky. I had a built-in system myself, and I was in high school. And again, it was a different time, different country, different mentality. But and I'm a short guy. I can be bullied, or nothing happened to me. I found other ways for people to come to me instead of me going to them and try to be accepted based on their conditions. So I never smoked. I never drank with my colleagues. When they had parties, like pretty much every day. So I didn't care. I said, guys, if you want to interact with me, these are my terms. I'm not coming after your terms or accept your terms. And I didn't care if they will accept me or not. Again, I had somehow a built-in system to be indifferent to a an attitude that I didn't go along with. Okay, but not everyone has that type of built-in system, and I try to teach my boys to do the same. Guys, don't be pleasers. Don't try to get along with some guys just because you want attention. Stay on your course and you're going to be respected. And you mentioned the church and living in fear. Yes, because we all grow up with the Bible. And in the Bible, the God, the made up God, is the one who is going to punish us if we don't behave properly. And I can't tell you how many guests came on the podcast mentioning their religious scars from a young age, and they couldn't get rid of them until late in their 30s because that trauma followed them throughout life. Either the father was a pastor or the family was very religious, and especially with women, telling them you have to behave in a certain way, otherwise God will punish you. So all this we carry with us. But at the same time, because now you are a therapist, as I mentioned earlier in our discussion, I think we need this type of experience to know how it is, get better, and help others, because otherwise we'll be help read from the books. That's it.